All right, so this is episode number 1 of Mind Your Own Business. I have here Nick Escalante, my man. Thank you so much for joining the call, for being here with us. He is a storyteller. He is actually the director of career services at NSU, but more than that, he's a storyteller and a person who's big in networking and helping people achieve their definition of success. How are you? Have you been?
Good, I'm good, Pablo. Thank you for having me, man. It's an absolute pleasure. I remember when you first talked about doing this, and I'm really excited to be here, especially as your first guest. That's awesome. I'm so happy to be here. But yeah, man, like you said, I'm a director for career services at NSU, specifically for the business school. And yeah, I love what I do.
You do? That's great. Actually, not that many people can say that.
Very
Yeah. So who do you help? And do you have a why?
Yeah. So, well, who do I help? Yeah. So I work with primarily with thinking higher education. I mostly work with students, but I work with students, alumni, through, I guess you could say, through trying to help the community. We have a vision as part of our school, which is to help develop people who will lead like organizations that are best for our world. So with that, we try to lead by example. So I help a lot of young professionals as well. I know when a lot of the times when I even meet with certain employers, I ask how I can help them, just not only by finding talent, but maybe even in their own professional development and how they want to move forward. So I try to help a little bit of everyone by pay, if you will. I help our students and our alumni, but what could I say? By my own mission, my own views in life, I try to pay forward anything that's been ever been given to me, and I try to help anyone that I can. And as for my why I do that, I felt growing up I was given certain privileges that were really nice, and in other areas I saw that it really lacked. No one was there to kind of give me, like, point me in a specific direction or help me figure out where I wanted to go or how I could figure out where I wanted to go by experimenting, like experiencing things. So I figured I could put myself in a seat where I could identify with people that didn't know what they wanted to do and kind of help them help themselves, if you will. The whole
Right.
idea of teaching a person to fish rather than, giving them a fish it's big for me. And my repayment for that is them paying it forward to someone else. So I just believe in a mission that is, if more people do what they love, we'll be better off as society.
That's great. That you'd mentioned leadership there, and I'm curious, can you shape a leader, or is that something that you're born with in your
So
eyes?
it's interesting, right? Because it's the nature versus nurture concept. And in
Right.
leadership, I think, first of all, you have to define kind of what leadership is. And it's maybe not even define, but just get a wider perspective of what leadership is, right? We normally automatically think it's going to be someone extremely forward facing and explaining things up front and how things should be done, or leading by example. But there's so many ways to lead. You can lead projects. You can be leading by motivating others to achieve things. You can be leading a forward-facing leader. You can be a servant leader who's helping people who are in dire need. There's so many different ways to lead. Now, can you learn it? I think in a lot of ways, many of us become leaders, but we just don't acknowledge it as that. So I definitely think that it's something that you can teach, you can help people learn. If when you're providing feedback or people become introspective and start asking themselves how we can do better, they start learning about how to lead themselves and in turn help lead others as well.
It's interesting. Yeah. And so if you were to help a person who's just stuck, right? They feel stuck. They're just starting out, whether an undergrad or just a grown 40-year-old guy, with a life that he or she just are not happy with. Where do you recommend they start?
One of the first things that's a great question, because it's not, I don't think everyone starts in the same place. We all have different things that we're curious about, things that we want to achieve. We have different views, different goals. It's the same idea that I tell people that success is also individually defined, even though society in Hollywood has done an amazing job of telling us we need to drive a Lamborghini, have a penthouse apartment that looks over the beach, but where to start, it depends entirely on everyone. But I do tell people to start very internally with one thing, which is, don't lie to yourself. Be honest with yourself on what you want. If you want a supercar, if you want to have that penthouse apartment, it's easy to define those types of things sometimes of what you want. But a better question is, what's a better definition of character is, what kind of pain, right, you're willing, or not necessarily pain, what kind of things you're willing to go through to get what you want. That's what's really going to tell me things like, are you willing to learn how to invest? Are you willing to work an 80-hour a week job, to just to give like a typical example of like Wall Street, like how we stereotypically see it, like, oh, that's 80 hours a week. If you want to be a doctor, are you willing to work 72-hour shifts as a doctor? So we have to understand not just what we want, but what we're willing to sacrifice or give up to get what we want. And that's always a good place to kind of start in understanding, yes, first of all, let's not lie to ourselves. And then once we start figuring out what we want, or experiencing things, finding things to experience in order to understand what we want, it's the beauty of experiences, is that you will figure out whether you like something, or sometimes more importantly, whether you don't. And with that, in turn, then you can start kind of looking into what it's going to cost you. Everything in life costs us, right? We all have one currency, which is time. We get the same amount no matter who you are, and how you invest that time. Well, that's entirely dependent on you as an individual, and how well you invest it is how the returns will come. And when it comes to like actually reaping what you sow, if you will.
Right. And what if someone says, I simply don't know. I just don't know what I want. I don't know what to do. Like, can you pick me up? Can you teach me just something?
Sure. I have students who come in and sit down. They're like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. And I'm like, awesome. And they're like, what? And I'm like, neither do I. And they're like, what? And I'm like, no, and it's not that I have no clue. It's not that I'm lost, right? There's a typical thing that we tend to see people fall in love with a destination. I want to be a millionaire. I'll only be happy when I'm a millionaire. I want to start a business. I'll only be happy when my business is successful. And we all have wants and desires to experience things, but sometimes we hold ourselves back, what we call paralysis by analysis. We start thinking, oh, should I do this? Should I do that? Should I do this? Should I do that? Oh, I'm getting too old. We have all of these like mental models of what we can and can't do. And guess what? It's all BS. Like, you're never too old to start doing something, or you're never too young to start doing something. Of course, maybe drinking, but like as far as everything else, I mean, right. You're never too old to try something new. In fact, I would rather dedicate myself to something, make a decision, and have it go wrong and then switch, rather than like sit down and wonder for years which one I should choose and not making an effective decision and moving along. But to answer your question, when someone comes in and says, I really don't know what to do, I start exactly with that. Like, cool. At least you know that about yourself. At least you're not lying to yourself and saying, I want to be a doctor, when the reality is maybe your parents wanted you to be a doctor, or I want to be an accountant because my parents are accountants. Not to say that that's not the case. Sometimes people do want that, but at least by admitting that you don't know what you want to do, you're in a good place. So I try telling people, all right, cool. What things have you always been eager to experience? Let's look at a bucket list. What do you want to do before that day comes, and then start defining on different successes there. Another great thing to look at is asking people what they do in their free time. You'd be surprised, like exactly, what's your passion? Like some people, like I talk to some people and they're like, my passion is truly gaming. And I'm like, oh, no way. Some people take that passion to a point where they identify like glitches in a game. And I'm like, dude, there's a field for that. Like, and it's really, it's an awesome field. If that is what you're passionate about, is finding these mistakes, by all means, make it part of your life. At the end of the day, no matter what job we're doing, we're solving problems. And if your passion is solving that kind of problem, then go forth and solve that problem. It's cool. It's a pain point. That's how, as long as you're solving problems, there's always going to be room for work.
That's cool. I mean, and do you need to have a mindset? Like you mentioned success, going from here to there, and just be willing to put in hard work or time or what have you. But do you need a specific mindset for that journey?
So specific mindset? No, I would say like people are going to be hungry for something different completely. What I would tell people is to keep an open mind for things that you like. We always think we know what we like, and that's okay. Like maybe we do know what we would truly enjoy, but sometimes it closes us off to not trying new things that we might actually fall in love with. So it's very interesting to tell people, hey, you need a specific mindset. I would say being open-minded is definitely part of that mindset, but there's a couple of tricks that can definitely help. One is always remain curious. Like no matter what you're having even when having a conversation with somebody, whether they are a 45-year-old CEO or a sanitation engineer that's 45 years old, they both have 45 years worth of stories and things that they can talk about, and struggles that they've been through. And while they may be vastly different, there's still learning perspectives on both those. So always remain curious, ask questions, even if you think it's a ridiculous question, ask it. If you are genuinely interested, one of the big things is stop caring what other people think about you. If the main point in your life is to just enjoy yourself and truly be successful by your own definition, then you do you, and you can move forward really well. And the last bit is kind of with that open-mindedness and that curiosity, be adaptive. COVID has kind of proven to all of us that it doesn't matter how well prepared we may think we may be, there's always a point where you have to say, man, we got to try something new. We got to adapt. We got to try to find different solutions to problems. And that it doesn't just go for the professional world. It also goes for our internal personal lives. And as long as you remain, curious, adaptive, and open-minded, the mindset that you craft around or with that, it'll help you be successful. But of course, the first step in all of it is defining what your success is and what it is that you want in life.
Well, that makes perfect sense. And I wanted to know, so for that success, what processes can you implement? What can you do? Like, what's your process like?
For my process for what?
For what you do right now for the school or for your personal goals, because there
things I go through, like to define my success, if you will.
Yeah. Do you have a to-do list? Do you have a calendar? I don't know.
So it's funny. I am a person who preaches to-do lists, yet I don't always use them. I am a person who, for me, I found certain to-do lists when I go very far forward. I continue to think about the future and kind of miss the current moment. I tend not to linger on the past too much. Except using the valuable learning lessons that I picked up from failures. Like I tell everyone, I've been successfully failing for 33 years. And there's a beauty to that because that means I've also been consistently learning throughout those 33 years to help me become more successful, or at least redefine my success and become more successful in different ways. But as far as defining the process for finding success for me, I stopped and I looked directly at myself, professional side away. And it was based off of an Oscar story that was Matthew McConaughey won an Oscar, and he started saying about who his hero was, and it ended up, to make it really short, he says that his hero is him 10 years from now. And he kind of creates this vision of who that person looks like. And then 10 years from there, they ask him like, oh, so you're your hero? And he's like, no, it's 10 years from, it's me now. And it's constantly, like he says, it's staying 10 years away from your hero. So you're always chasing something. You're chasing yourself. You're never going to catch up to them, right? So it's about kind of defining what it is you want in your life. One of the things that I've known my entire life that I wanted to be is a father. Like that didn't, I'm not a dad yet. Hopefully soon in the near future. But it's one of the things that I've known I've wanted to be. And just no questions asked. And I've always known that I want to help people, which is oddly enough, the thing that most people tell me when they come into my office. I'm like, what do you want to do? They're like, I want to help people. And I was like, okay, but there's hundreds and millions of ways of doing that. Some people know immediately what they want to do. Some people figure it out later. I didn't figure it out until I was 29. And it was really my brother who figured it out for me in a way that my passion was developing people. So it turns out everything I had done in the past, from helping students to helping people in their professional lives, to my passion and what I truly enjoyed was working with different people, because it's a different puzzle in front of me. So it's a different set of challenges. And I'm very good at vicariously living through other people's successes. And it's cool. So when I work with someone and then they turn something around and they teach it to someone else, but not only that, but they manage to take that and become successful and make it their own first, that's awesome.
Exponential growth. Yep.
No. And it's just very, very cool for me to be able to do that. But we all have, I guess, different processes. For me, it started with some radical honesty internally, saying, what does society condition me to want, and what do I actually want, and how can I get there? And then little by little, just establishing small goals to keep. And I say short-term goals. It's good to have a long-term goal in sight, But short-term goals, it's little steps that get you, to finish that marathon. It's not the thinking about one marathon, it's 26, individual 1 mile runs. So it's very interesting when you look at it that way, because it's a lot easier to think about 26 1 miles than one 26-mile run. So as you start establishing those things, maybe you set one, you're like, okay, when I reach 10 miles, I only have like 16.1 left. When I reach 20, it's only 6.1, or that elusive moment when you reach 16.1, you have less than 10 miles left. So it's about analyzing things. But like I said, that's my process. Other people have different ones. Some people are so good at looking long-term that they don't sway from their goal and they become successful doing that. And kudos to them. But it's individual, and you have to figure out what works for you. And a lot of that is figuring out what doesn't work for you.
And you mentioned failures, and how failures are not actually a negative thing, right? I agree 100% with that. Do you have a personal or 2 or 3 personal failures you would say, or rude awakenings, or things that really, oh man, this was a great teacher for me, although it hurt a lot?
Sure. So there's one that comes to mind, because when I coach students, I tell them, like, whenever I tell a student, hey, tell me about a time that something didn't go as planned and what you learned from it, a lot of people end up telling me, like, oh, I overcommitted to a lot of things. And I say, okay, but one of the things that really teaches you lessons sometimes is when you're teetering between life and death, if you will. And one of those happened to me when I was training Navy candidates, and they were doing an underwater swim. They had to dive in, get to the other side, and come back. And I saw this really confident swimmer who I knew was great. And he dove in, and I didn't pay any attention to him, and he went off because I was paying attention to the guy who was coming after him, who was not a strong swimmer. What I didn't realize is that the really good swimmer hit his head on the other side. Ooh. And fortunately, I looked up and I was like, man, this guy should be. And I saw him not flailing, but just seemed disoriented. So I told the other guy, I pulled him out. I told him, like, hey, man, out of the pool. And then I went to check on him, and he was not okay. Fortunately, he hadn't drowned or anything. But I'm like, had I only focused on this guy, I could have lost him. Ooh. So that was an important moment for me to kind of realize that. And it's a failure in the sense that I failed myself on not paying the proper attention somewhere, right? But I mean, failures happen on a constant basis, but that's the thing. So do successes. Okay. So not to switch this question around on you, but when we tell a person, this is from Susan Ford Collins, you tell them to write 100 or 200 successes they've had. If I tell people to think, what successes have you had in your life? People think, well, I got my license, or I got my degree. I passed an exam. People don't necessarily think about the small things or the successes of cutting things out. Sometimes saying no is a perfect success. It opens up time. It allows you to do more for you. Sometimes it's about it's succeeding in small things. You know what? Today I got up and I actually worked out. That's a success. That's a very a short-term success, but a lot of short-term success builds up into a habit of succeeding in different ways and allows you to reach those areas that you want to reach for success. But other failures, and this is funny because I mentioned that one because that one's one that comes up often, but I don't often try to linger on them. I try to take the lessons learned. Everyone goes through bad moments in life, but in 6 months, a year, 5 years, you look back and you're like, I can't believe I made such a big deal about that. and you try to let them go. I mean, personally, I love doing public speaking, and it's so funny because I'll get up and do a presentation, get an applause and everything, and I think, man, in my head, I'm my harshest critic. I'm like, oh, I should have done this, I should have told that joke, I should have done that, and I think I'm failing. And in my way, in my own very personal way, I am. Other people might say, wow, that was such a great talk. I hope they feel that way, but I look at it and I'm like, dude, how, why didn't I tell this joke? It would have been so much better. So we always hold different ideas of what other people believe we show off as success and what we believe is our success. So we have like I said, we're our harshest critic. We should also be our greatest supporter. Remain humble about it. I know for me personally, that sometimes is a catch on me. I need to be more humble, and I try. But it's about analyzing those things, and additional failures, just more than, I guess everyone says it's okay to fail. It's okay to fail. Just no one tells you how, how to
fail.
Yeah, no, people
How
just
to come back.
Yeah, no. I mean, no one tells you exactly the process of getting back up. Everyone's like, it's good to fail. And then everyone's like, Okay. But what they don't tell you, what they should tell you is like, just try. Just try. Like we stop and we look at all these things. And it's again, back to that point earlier, paralysis by analysis, right? It's we don't even try. And if we don't try, we can't fail. And if we don't fail, we don't learn. And if we, even when we succeed, we learn better ways to do things. I tell people to spend a life pursuing perfection, but understanding you will never reach it. So just redefine, do better, like do better the following day. If you do your best that you can today, like be the best director of career services, right? Be the best podcast host you can be today. And then tomorrow, then set the baseline on today's results. And you were like, I gave it my all. And now I'm going to give it my all plus X. Like I'm going to find more inside of me to do it. So it's a lot in understanding those different types of things in order to kind of reach a level where you're successful and learn from your failures. And you'll constantly find something different. I mean, it's everything. Just how we think about failures being something big and successes being something big, they're also really small. Like if you failed at a test, right? A small quiz that was maybe 5% of your grade. You failed it, right? But then like, what do you learn? Like, oh, did I give it enough time for studying? Maybe I'm not studying the right way. How can I do this? You can, and people start thinking about this and Googling it when the easiest question that no one thinks about is just
right.
picking up the phone and talking to your professor and being like, hey, the way I'm studying for this isn't working. Is there anything else you would recommend? It's a way to make a roadmap for yourself, for sure.
And talking about networking, I want for you to explain to me and us the importance of networking, not only for, career, to get a job actually, but for everything in life, even sales, marketing, everything, getting good relationships.
So there's a lot of things that go into that question. So the last thing you mentioned, sales and relationships. People don't do business with organizations, they do business with people, right? They do business because they like you. I mean, you see this on a constant basis. If we just solely base things off of price, people would go with the cheapest option. But a lot of the times it depends on who you are as a person. I would say the majority of the time, if not the entire time, it depends on who you are as a person and whether people want to do business with you or not. So, and for people to get to know you, you have to network with people. That could be a conversation on LinkedIn, like you and I once met, remember, like off of LinkedIn and a couple of emails. That could be even going to a bar and having a conversation with people at a bar. It could be going to a career fair, a networking event that's been placed either by your organization or another organization, Chamber of Commerce, for example, and getting to talk to people. People worry about like so much about how do I tell my story? Telling your story, becoming that storyteller is key. But one of the ways, the easiest ways to become a storyteller is by asking people their story. What's their life about?
It's about them.
Exactly. And like interested is interesting is a typical thing that's said. And yeah, so once you start hearing how people tell their stories, you become a more effective storyteller yourself. It's kind of how they say like good writers read a lot. So the importance is I think it's stated a lot, but I feel like people believe, specifically for careers, that they can just cold apply and land their jobs. And while it's true, you can, but there's crazy statistics that go out there. And I love that. I always say 87% of statistics are made up. But one of the ones that I saw was, I honestly thought ludicrous, but I was like, there's got to be some reality, even if we take certain percentages off. It was 75% of jobs are never posted online.
Really?
Take that into thought for a second, okay?
75.
75%. That I think that number is super high up there. But let's take 25% off of that. We're looking at 50% of jobs are not posted online. That means you're competing with millions of people for 50% of jobs. Where this, like, if you want to look at that mathematically, then go for the one that has less people and start networking your way into jobs. That's how you land these opportunities. People often think of organizations as employers, as organizations, rather than what I choose to view them as organisms. They're made of people. They're living people who do the jobs and functions at these different organizations. You are dealing with people. So naturally, if I were like recommending someone to apply somewhere, I'd be like, hey, reach out to a hiring manager or someone who would be in that similar role, and say, hey, introduce yourself, tell them who you are, and say, hey, I'm looking at these different roles that are coming up, and I'm very interested, and I would love to get to have a conversation about like your story with the company, what you've done, and how you've moved forward, and what you think about it. And the worst thing that people can say is no, which leads us to a wonderful other point, that people need to learn how to deal with rejection.
And how?
Yeah, it's okay. We're gonna get rejected in love, in relationships, at work, and in school. We get rejected left and
All the
right.
time.
We have some of the toughest time dealing with that. We fear it so much, and I think it correlates with failure, that we choose not to try.
Mm.
Like, hey, go try and get that person's number, and you're like, no, why? Because you're gonna get shot down. In Spanish, we always say it, el no ya lo tienes. You already have the no.
Yeah.
Like, so if you try, the only thing it can do is go up, right? It can only be a maybe, you see? And sometimes it's not even, you don't need a yes. Sometimes just take a no to a maybe. And then from a maybe, you can do so much in sales, in your personal development, your professional development, and work from there. But yeah, the value of networking in any situation. I mean, storytelling is one of the greatest things we've ever had. We have more history in storytelling than we do in written history. I mean, oral transfer of history has been around forever. And of course, we all embellish stories. You know, we say like, oh, there were 1,000 firefighters there. No, there weren't. But it still tells a good story, you know? So the value of networking is, it can't be stated enough.
And thinking about that, like maybe what kind of knowledge would you like to share with people? Maybe books, movies that you really think they need to see or read or listen to, whether for networking, personal growth, or something that just impacted you so much that shaped you in some way.
That is a fantastic question. I think most of the impacts I've ever received have been through networking with people. I am an avid film watcher, if you will. I'm a film aficionado. I love watching movies and getting different ideas. I'm that kind of guy. I'm that ADD for jobs. I watch James Bond. I'm like, oh, I would love to work for MI5, you know? And then, I turn it around and you watch Active Valor, and I was like, oh, being Navy SEAL would be really cool too. Or you watch the Big Short, and you're like, oh man, being an investor, look how much money they've made. Which is a terrible example because the Big Short was about the financial crisis. But I mean, it just gives you an idea. Like I tell people to watch and read whatever they can, but always question things, because we're going to read, like, one of the things we have in the world right now is news, right? And everyone, it's not necessarily reporting just facts, we report opinions. So if you think something doesn't sit well with you, then research it, do some research and see how you feel about it. And I'm just thinking more so on movies and things to watch. And it's funny because the immediate thing I think about is just movies that perhaps don't line up with professional development. Good Will Hunting, for example, Robin Williams and Matt Damon, and Ben Affleck's in it as well, I think. And so is Casey Affleck. Might be wrong on that. But I mean, for me, it was just an idea of reading things and watching things that inspire you. Like the way he took I don't know if you've ever seen Good Will Hunting, but he takes this, he's a janitor who's like, he cleans MIT, and he has an amazing brain for mathematics. And it's just the way that he has such a talent, yet he's in this area of life, and how he gets the right push and the right support system going, and it helps you, and it helps him kind of get somewhere completely different. And so I guess there is a learning lesson there. Find out what your support resources are and what your support system is. There are going to be rough days in life. That's can't be debated. All right. There are problems left and right on a constant basis. And all you can do is wish for better problems. That's the whole thing, right? So when you have your support system and your outlets for when you're stressed, then you'll do great. You just understand, like, this is a day where I kind of glitched. I'm a little bit upset. Okay, but I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to play a soccer game, and then I'm going to be fine. Or I'm going to sit down and play some video games. I'm going to go watch a movie. I'm going to go hang out. Like, whatever helps you and moves you forward will definitely get you out of there. But I mean, things that kind of shaped me was random conversations, books that are like left and right, just random stuff, like Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely, Freakonomics. They were just books on human behavior and decision-making sciences, behavioral economics, which consequentially is what like got me into a master's in behavioral economics, was reading those books that just make you think, like, how do people make decisions? Because we don't always do it the most logical way. So how do they do it? What makes you think that 5-cent aspirin is less effective than 50-cent aspirin if they're both the same components? So I don't know. For me, it's just have a genuine interest. It's not necessarily something I can tell you to read or watch. Susan Ford Collins, I mentioned earlier, she has the Technology of Success. Highly recommend that. Just because she really does an amazing job at teaching people and showing people that success is not just these big things in life. It's a lot of the little stuff too. And she does an amazing job at expressing it. And it's her, I believe it's, how did she word it? Technology of Success. And it's like these 10 steps towards becoming successful. Well, towards like seeing what success is. And it's amazing.
That's great. Thank you for the recommendation.
Sure.
And I just want to be mindful of your time. Where do we find you? How can we follow you?
I'm always on LinkedIn. I made it my mission a couple years back to make it my most active social media in any way, shape, or form. I tell everyone, I tell my students, LinkedIn is where you post stuff and the likes and shares can land you jobs. And it's an amazing way. You never know. You're one post away from posting something that's really meaningful to someone who can absolutely change your life. It's an amazing place to network with low risk. You can reach out at whenever, and I will give that as a bit of advice. Click add note whenever you connect with somebody. I prefer people, like, it's easier to do it off a laptop because add note pops up immediately. On the phone, not so much, but use it, add a note, tell someone about yourself. It's kind of like the first line in a book. Either it hooks you or it doesn't. So give them something. Don't give your whole life away, but make someone say, I'm interested. Let me click on this person, accept them, and have a conversation. And then craft it from there. Also, whenever people are building these relationships, make sure, I tell everyone that you understand that relationships, mentorships, are all a two-way street. It's not just about how they can help you. It's about how you can help them as well. So, but yeah, to answer your question, LinkedIn, by all means, feel free, like, reach out to me. If you have questions about your own personal, professional development, please feel free to ask. It's a little bit like, I could say selfish, because you're going to ask questions, you're going to say things, and I'm going to learn a lot from you as well. So I highly encourage it. If you're not doing it for yourself, add me and teach me something. I love being taught things. I love hearing stories. So at the very least, reach out to me to tell me your story. I highly encourage it.
I appreciate the time, Nick. I really thank you for being here and for sharing all the knowledge. You are so on point of so many things. We agree very much. And thank you so much. Any final comments, thoughts?
No, I just want to say thank you. I'm sure this podcast is going to be a success as you get more people on here and having a blast. And I look forward to listening in and seeing who else you bring on here, and perhaps even getting in contact with them as well, and with more of your listeners and everything. Always happy to have a conversation, whether it's virtual. If people are ever in town in South Florida, please feel free to say, "Hey, Nick, I'm in town. I would love to chat." I'm always happy to grab some coffee.
That sounds great. Thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure,
man. Bye-bye. Thanks. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. As you know, sharing is caring. See you next time. Bye-bye.